This is the 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M4 Max chip. When Apple announced the M4 chip lineup, I read all the reviews, and it looked like Apple had a winner on their hands. So in November, I forked over an ungodly amount of cash and bought this 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M4 Max chip. It's got the top spec version of the chip, the one with the 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU, and 16 neural cores. I also upgraded the RAM to 64 gigabytes, but kept the storage at 1 terabyte. I also skipped the nano texture display because, let's be honest, this laptop is going to live in clamshell mode for most of its life. And for 2 solid months, this has been my daily driver. To put it into perspective, I need to show you where I'm coming from. And where I'm coming from is my base model M1 MacBook Air. After 4 years of painstakingly editing videos on this machine, I was desperate to make an upgrade. So, after 2 months of use, did this new MacBook Pro live up to the hype? Was it worth the upgrade from the M1 Air? And should you splurge on this machine or go for a more budget-friendly option like the M3 Pro or the M3 Max? Let's find out. Starting with the build quality. The 14-inch model feels absolutely rock solid, like it's carved from a single block of metal. It's the perfect size, it's sleek, portable, and backpack friendly. And the new space black finish? Absolutely gorgeous. Apple has continued to refine this finish, and it's more resistant to fingerprints, though smudges can develop over time. Turning over to the keyboard and trackpad, these are still the best in the business. Typing feels solid while still being light somehow, and the trackpad is the size of a small country. I absolutely love it. Now onto the screen. With quantum dot technology and 1000 nits of brightness, it's the most detail I've ever seen on a screen so far. As for brightness, in my 2 months of use, I've never needed to go above 600 nits of brightness. Max brightness actually feels downright dangerous. But if you're the type to work outside on a bright sunny day, it's there if you need it. And for all the video call warriors out there, the webcam got an upgrade to 12 megapixels. So there's that. Moving on, ports. On the left side, we have MagSafe, 2 Thunderbolt 5 ports, and a 3.5mm high-impedance headphone jack. On the right side, we have an HDMI 2.1, another Thunderbolt 5 port, and a full-size SD card slot. Thunderbolt 5 is ridiculously fast, but let's face it, affordable SSDs to match the speed aren't here yet. Maybe in a year or 2, but until then, existing SSDs get the job done without any surprises. I genuinely appreciate all the ports that Apple has provided on this machine, but the heart of this machine is the M4 Max chip. So let's talk performance. Compared to my M1 Air, the M4 Max chip is an absolute monster, and my main use case is Resolve. So to test performance, I loaded up the timeline with one of my videos from a few months ago. The talking head part is a 12-minute clip in 4K H.265 with multiple effects and layers on top. With render cache turned off and playback set to full resolution, scrolling through the timeline was an absolute breeze. No stutter, no lag, just buttery smooth playback. As for export times, insanely fast. We're talking timelines rendering faster than real time. This 12-minute timeline rendered in approximately 10 minutes. My M1 Air took more than an hour to export the same video. In fact, to make this edit work on my M1 Air, I had to create 1080p proxies at half resolution and then play the proxies at quarter resolution after that to have any chance of scrubbing through the timeline or playback. The M4 Max chip absolutely chews through anything you throw at it. There is no tree big enough to choke this wood chipper, at least not anything that I can throw at it anyways. So I threw a 42-second benchmarking timeline designed by Team 2 Films to really push the system to its limit, and I completed 3 consecutive renders. The first render took 4 minutes and 12 seconds. For comparison, Team to Films completed this render on their 16-inch model in 3 minutes and 58 seconds. But this result also brings out my biggest pain point and, dare I say, fatal flaw. In 2 years, Apple has doubled the power of the top-end M4 chip, but it hasn't kept pace with the design of the battery or the chassis to match that power. You see, each export of my 12-minute video depleted the battery by about 10%, and each export of the T2F timeline depleted the battery by 5 to 6%. Even just scrubbing through the timeline on Resolve saw the battery percentage drop digits every 5 to 10 minutes. At that pace, there is no way I would be able to make Apple's advertised use case of 22 hours on a single charge. I would be lucky to get 2 to 3 hours of use on a single charge at that point. I also noticed that render times got longer as the laptop got toasty. If I did multiple renders back to back, the time would increase by about 10% each time. For example, the second run of the T2F timeline took 25 seconds longer. And staying on the topic of warm laptops, during renders, the fan kicked in almost immediately and spun at high RPMs. This fan is loud and pushing out a ton of hot air. It's actually quite distracting. While the MacBook never got uncomfortably hot, it was definitely on the top end of warm to touch. And it seems like the fan on this machine kicks in especially hard when you max out the graphics cores, which means that within 5 minutes of scrubbing through any timeline on Resolve or doing anything graphics heavy, the fan is absolutely screaming. For reference, tests by other reviewers find the 16-inch models to fare better in this regard. The problem is that the current MacBook Pro chassis has remained pretty much the same since the redesign for the M1 Max, but the thermal envelope that it can handle is now well below the power output of the M4 Max chip, and I'm guessing that the 16-inch model sits somewhere on the ragged edge of being able to tame this wild horse. But the 16-inch is a no-go for me because of the extra cost and the lack of portability from my perspective. My honest view is that if you want to experience the full unhindered power of this chip on a consistent basis, you should wait for the Mac Studio whenever that comes out in 2025. It should have much better cooling than the laptop form factor. So coming back to the questions I posed at the start, did this new MacBook Pro live up to the hype? Yes, it absolutely did, but only up to a point. For starters, I am now spoiled by the insanely fast render times and the buttery smooth operations. This level of power is truly addictive. But I also know that this laptop will never be truly portable. Not if I need to plug it in every time I do a video editing session for more than an hour or I'm completing long renders. This brings me to the second question. Was it worth upgrading from the M1 Air? Again, yes. But again, only up to a point. While the video editing performance blew me away, the rest of the machine felt no different than my M1 Air. All other applications felt about as responsive as my M1 Air, and new features like Apple Intelligence fared not that much better. In fact, as of this moment, Apple Intelligence is, quite frankly, a joke. But more on that in another video. And finally, should you splurge on this machine or go for a more budget-friendly option like the M3 Pro or the M3 Max? To me, the heart of this question is whether you're getting the optimal performance to price ratio. Because of the overheating issue and the subsequent performance throttling, I'm never truly getting all the goods that I paid for. In fact, I'm probably only ever getting about 90% of the performance. A similar spec M3 Max is 20% slower, but considering that you can get one for $1,000 less, which equates to a 25% savings, the question can be rephrased as to whether that savings is worth a 20% drop in performance. To be honest, I don't have a clear answer for this question, but I think I know how to get one. To start, Apple did us a favor this year by not kneecapping the mid-tier processor, the M4 Pro. On paper, The top spec M4 Pro has half the graphics cores, half the video encode-decode engines, half the memory bandwidth, and is missing 2 CPU cores compared to the M4 Max. But specs aren't everything, and real-world performance can surprise us. And it looks like this year that might actually be the case. By all accounts, the M4 Pro seems to be just as capable as the M3 Max from last year, and it's also $1,000 cheaper than the M4 Max, which makes it feel like the more balanced option this year. So in the quest for optimal performance per dollar, I am going to return the M4 Max and get the M4 Pro instead. If you're in the same boat as me, torn between these two options, stay tuned as I'll be putting the M4 Pro through its paces as soon as I get it. With that said, what do you think? Is the M4 Max worth the splurge, or would you go for a more practical option? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.